we're recording now. We have week 3, and we've done a couple of VR experiences, and we're about to look at the VR template for Unreal. And let's explore a little bit some of the other templates, and I just kind of opened them up really briefly. So when we start a new project, we say we launch, I'm still using 4.17 just for now. When we launch a new project, it gives us a bunch of options, and I think we looked at the marble one last week, maybe briefly. I'm going to open up, and I've already made a one for first person and third person, which can both be used for VR to some degree of success. And I'm going to go over those, and then I'll show you the real templates that are made for VR that have locomotion built in. Right? So we make a new project, and then we could choose a template. And we're going to be later on a second using virtual reality, but I want to start off with these two first, so we can just take a look at them before we jump into the ones that are designed for VR. So I made the projects already. We have VR first person. Let's do that one first. Cool. And this is just a template. Like, here's the template map, and here's the template blueprint for our camera control. And just so you know, Unreal, that terminology is called a pawn. You possess the terminology. You possess a pawn. A pawn is the camera you control. Okay. And we are, even though we're not playing a multiplayer game, we are player 1, which indexing starts at 0. So we're actually player 0. So the movie coming out in the book are wrong. It's already player 0. You can see here I've set that for, dismiss that. If we say what we're possessing, all the way down here, very bottom, all these details, we are auto-possessing player 0. So pawn's the terminology, and you possess and it's player 0. Okay, and if I said play normally, boom, we have a template and we have a little gun that's shooting these soft pellets. We have focus already enabled. They have both collision and they have So what's kind of cool about this, or what's interesting about this, is if I want to watch this in VR instead, I come to VR preview, and now I got like a gun stuck to my head, which is really weird. I don't know the functionality of this, but I still can. I have to click on it. Now you can see. I have a gun stuck to my head. See? Right, I'm shooting out of my nose. It's really interesting. I highly recommend trying it a little bit. And then my WASD keys work, right? So now So now I'm doing VR with that way. And so what's interesting about these WASD keys, these are button presses. These are events that are being triggered that are already programmed into this template. Okay, so by starting this project, I'm going to go to the project settings, and what it does is there's a lot of different ways of moving around, especially when you start using VR controllers. And I have this right here, input. It has some mappings, and what it's saying is that I could just program things on certain key presses. But what I'm doing here is I'm aggregating a bunch of key presses so that I can use an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, my WASD keys, my arrow keys, and like other things. So jump is not only spacebar, but it's also game face button bottom, and also the motion controller button. Right? I could have jumped by pressing these. So what this is doing is creating an aggregate events. Okay, this is important for when we get to the VR thing later on. Okay, but for right now, so I can fire with a bunch of different buttons, and what I've done is I've created this custom thing. So instead of finding left mouse button in my blueprints later on, I can find the word fire, and it accounts for all 3 of those, right? This is a very smart way of saving some time later on. It's worth going over now, knowing how this works. It has all those things that are in this pawn blueprint. Great, and you see I have there's the gun, right? And that's the VR gun. It depending on if I'm in VR mode or not, it toggles visibility on these. So let's take a look at third person, okay? So feel free to play around these templates and just augment it in the way you want to. You have a little gun, you have collisions, everything's working. So we're going to go back to VR third. So this is a third-person template for what's called like the Unreal Mannequin, and he will be jumping and has a camera that's following around behind him. Okay, which sounds kind of voyeuristic, I guess, if you're going to be in VR and always falling behind somebody. But I'm going to show you how to utilize it for also doing some VR experiences. So here we go. As I said before, here's our pawn, right? And he has a camera with what's called like a boom arm, right? And when you hit play, you're controlling the camera with the mouse, right? And then moving him around, or she around, or it around with the WASD keys and the spacebar for jumping, right? And this also has all the axis mapping, so I can use it with the PlayStation controller, all that kind of stuff. Let's try it in VR real quick. All right, so instead of doing selected viewport, I can do VR preview, and now I'm like hanging out behind him, and when he runs, I'm like, "Hey, I'm coming with you." Not the greatest experience for me right now. But let's open up our first blueprint. This will be kind of complicated. We're going to get into much simpler ones first, but since I'm here, I'm going to talk about it. So this is my third-person character, and it has a hyperlink right there. You see that? That'll open up my blueprint immediately, or I can right-click and find in Content Browser. There it is. If I open it up, I see kind of the same thing, right? Here's my guy, and here's all the components that are involved with it, okay? I can actually take this camera, this boom arm, and I'm going to shrink it. And then I'm going to move it up. Right in there. And now I want to come back into VR. I didn't do it perfectly, but I shouldn't have done as much height. I can be the guy, and as I move around, my legs move for me. All right, so let's go back into it. I can put it this way. Bring it down a little bit to 0. And make sure that it's 0. So if I zero it out, it should work now. So yeah, now I'm him, or I'm actually at his waist. If I look down, I have the WASD keys working for my own legs. So I move around, right? So we could dial that in a little bit better later on. But that's just some ideas for how to use the other templates to try different things besides just the VR templates. Now, I mentioned the axis mappings, and that's important for the way I'm about to start this project. When you import content, so I'm using the same project for this class for the whole semester, and next week I'm going to show you version control, and I'll put it into version control, and you guys can pull it, and that way you can have my files to play around with, and it's all in one place. So, and then we can learn that. Let's see. So here we are. Here's this project. So we'll see the wonderful landscape I made last week. And then I'm going to, instead of starting off with a template, I'm going to import the VR template and use it from there. Great. So in this world, I don't have a pawn just yet. I have a player start, and that's my player 0. I want to get some of those pawns from the VR template, which we haven't really looked at yet. So I'm going to add new, add feature or content pack. So if I hadn't started with the starter content, I could import it this way, and I can also bring in my virtual reality template, which will have teleporting built in. So I'm going to add it to the project. Great. But the problem is it doesn't import. And I don't know, maybe there's a way to do it. It doesn't automatically import those mappings. So I go to my project settings. It's still talking about the simple. It doesn't have anything at all because I started off with a blank template, right? It doesn't bring those in. So what I did was I made a blank VR template project, and I exported these mappings, and I put it on my desktop. So if you run across this, and I'll put this up in the week 3 for you, I can go to my desktop and bring in these mappings. It's just an XML sheet just with listing what these files are, aggregating together. I bring that in, boom, now I have the mappings for teleporting, which could be both thumbsticks, face buttons, and grabbing, and all that kind of stuff. So now I have that. That's just a common mistake we've made in the last couple of VR classes I've taught. So here's a way around it. It's just this INI file, and it can go right here into the Slack. So now let's use some of these. We can filter by levels. We already have a level filter right here. So I'm going to go to the root and look at levels, and there are 2 VR levels. There's an HMD locomotion and a motion controller map, but we also have a startup map that kind of explains them. So here we have the HMD gamepad, which is found here. It gives me kind of a room scale way of moving around, and I'm just moving with the HMD. And then the HMD plus motion controller will give me some hands, and then I can move around using the controllers, using the thumbpad and touchpad and thumbstick, and I can grab options. Right. So there we are. So let's start off with a simpler one. Let's do HMD locomotion. All right, VR template, and let's just dive in. All right, I'm going to hit play and VR preview. And what it's doing is, first of all, it puts me in the floor. Let me fix that real quick. I'm going to open up this template real quick. And where is... Excuse me for 1 second. So these are blueprints. It's all node-based stuff. Basically, it thinks I'm using a Vive for some reason. It's trying to do it from the floor. We're going to say... Please make it go from eye level. Boink. Alright, back to what we're doing. Nope, it looks like I'm still on the ground. I'll have to figure out what's going on here. But what we have here is HMD locomotion, right? So wherever I'm looking, this sphere is kind of ray casting off my gaze, and then I hit spacebar and I'm there. Right? So this is like the most simple way of moving around. Teleporting, okay? Don't know about the height thing, I'll figure that out. Post something about it next week. I think it might just be the engine version. I've never had to issue that before. So that's HMD locomotion map. Let me go ahead and go to the motion controller map. Cool, so what we have here now is these little cubes, and we're going to spend some time with these cubes today. All right. I'm just going to jump in there into the floor again, probably. Yes, well, now I'm a little higher up. Anyway, so I got hands. Cool little robot hands, right? And then if I use the thumb trigger and I press down, I now have this arc, right? And I can teleport. And if I rotate the stick around, I can adjust the orientation. Alright? So now I'm looking the other way, or that actually wasn't working correct. Oh, there, that time it worked. Alright, and then what do I have here? Well, I got these little, I'm assuming I can pick these up. Cool. Alright. That's vibrating. That's fun. I'm out of my tracking zone. There we go. And I can toss to myself. Right? So this little template gets you up and running with this right away. So let's take a little look at what these mechanics are behind this, and then we're going to play around with this a little further. Okay? So, right, that's already really cool, right? That's really exciting. Right, we own this. Just escape, come back out. And before we jump into that a little bit more, we're going to talk about collisions in physics. So what we have are these little cubes, and these are blueprints, okay? And let's look at the details panel right here. We see that there's the geometry, the material, which is this blue material, and then it's set to simulate physics. If I turn this off, they wouldn't fall anymore. they would just hang there in the air, and that's how you create platforms you stand on and stuff, right? And then we're actually generating events when there is collisions with it, because that's how we know when we're grabbing it, right? And how we know we want to attach it to the hand. So what are collisions? When we import objects, and which we're going to do later on, it'll auto-generate collision. But things already in the engine, we can look at it by saying show, and you see its collisions are turned off. Now if I look at the edges of these, it has a little box, okay? And what's important about this is not really, you really can't tell right now, because these are really simple boxes themselves. But should we have really complex geometry, what collisions are doing is not having us calculate all the different polygons that are in that geometry and looking at a simplified version of the mesh. So you can make custom collisions for custom assets, so they're simplified and you're not having to calculate all the incidences of how it rolls and all that kind of stuff, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to open up the static mesh, right? I'm going to open up static mesh editor, and here it is, and I can see my collisions. Right? There's like this little green line here. I can also delete it, and now it has no collisions. So if I do this, and I just hit preview right here, you're going to see that everything falls through and no longer has collisions, right? So this makes sense. Let's go back to that, and let's add in a collision. Here's a simplified sphere. So now what's going to happen? Well, it's not going to be a box. It's going to actually roll, because a collision is what is actually doing the geometry, right? I'm going to bring it in a little bit. It's the wrong way. There we go. Bring it in a little bit, and then let's save. And now when I take a look at it, they're all going to roll, right? Because it's about the collision that's doing the interaction. Pretty weird though, right? How we're like faking it and stuff. So what we're also seeing is that every one of these blueprints is behaving the same way. This is a basic blueprint that's a class blueprint. Every cube in there is a object of a class. Okay, and how we can kind of investigate that further is for just this one, I don't want you to be a cube anymore. I want you to be, let's find all the static meshes here. I want you to be this cone. And just that one changed, right? So this is just one object of a blueprint class. If I come back to the blueprint itself, which is called BP pickup cube, that's the only blueprint for picking up things in here. We're just using it a bunch of times, right? Just a bunch of instances of this. But if I wanted to change all of them to the cube, if I opened up this and changed this to a cube, or sorry, to anything else, like, I don't know, a cone, right there, compile. Now they've all changed. Okay, so universal changes and then just general changes to local things, and that's kind of how programming is done inside of the engine. And we're gonna talk about different kind of blueprints, but basically everything in this world is an actor. So this is a blueprint class actor. It's the most simple kind of blueprint. I'm going to put this back to a cube. And now we're also going to look at the materials real quick. So also I just want some of these to be a certain kind of material. And so in the same way, I can turn this one to a stone, right? This one to this kind of stone. And there we go. Each one can be changed individually. So if you want to use this blueprint for picking up things, you just change the mesh and make sure the mesh has the right collision. And now we have things we can throw around. We don't even have to understand the underlying blueprints, and we probably don't understand the underlying blueprints until maybe another couple of weeks. But what we have here is something very usable for creating interactions. Okay. So that's super fun. But now we're going to create a blueprint from scratch. Okay. Yeah, we'll create a blueprint from scratch. Okay. So there are two major blueprints we'll be using for this. Well, there's three major blueprints. We've already talked about one, which is the pawn, right? This is all the rules about how you can have control things from the camera's perspective. we have actor blueprints, which are all these things that are repetitive, right? If we have a certain door that opens up in a certain way, and we have millions of levels, we're going to use the same blueprint in every level. It needs to exist outside the level. But if we have interactivity when we want to prototype just here, we're going to do what's called a level blueprint. And if I go here to blueprints and I just open up level blueprint, we're going to create our first one. Just this empty space, and we're going to use the node-based programming language that's called blueprints here, okay? Details panel, which we're used to, and then any kind of variables, all the data types are the same as C++. All those things are still valid, and we'll be dealing mainly with bools, floats, and integers, and some other custom component ones. All right. So if I right-click, I can create new nodes. All right. But what's also great is this context sensitive. Right now, I have in the world outliner selected the pawn. This right here, if I drill down into all this stuff, this is every function in the game engine and all 10 gigabytes of the game engine that can be used with the pawn. Right? I take off context sensitive. This is every function in Unreal is listed right here. And if I wanted to, I could type and search for it, or I could just hunt and peck and find that function I want to use and drag it out to work with it. I want to play around with this context sensitivity. All right? And what I want to do is I want to create a collision, something I could throw these spheres at, that when I hit it, it will turn a light off and on. Okay, I want to turn a light off and on by throwing objects. So what we have is just a generic volume that is just a trigger. This is a box trigger. It's invisible. If I hit play, it's not there. But what it is it's just, if you look at the details, it just knows about collisions. The collision preset is it just knows about triggers, and it can generate overlap events. This is a thing that just sends out overlap events. If I go to my level blueprint, which is right here, if I right click, I see events for trigger box, for collision, and I know that I have an actor begin overlap. When I first overlap through that thing, when I first throw something through, I want to trigger an event, and events are red. Key presses are red, right? If I want to do spacebar, right? Spacebar is also red, right? I know when it's pressed, I know when it's released, okay? And what the white arrow is this is a execution pin. This is an execution pin. And when spacebar happens, something happens, right? So let's get a light in there. I'm going to bring a light from the engine content, like these beautiful point light, right? And I want to turn this off and on, okay? Context sensitive. I now have a reference to the point light. And what did I say I want to do? I want to toggle visibility. Let's try it. I just drag off, let go, and say toggle visibility. And I'm going to connect the execution pin to right here. Okay? I'm going to bring my little HMD thing a little bit closer. So I start off and I can see it. I raise it up. But when I teleport, it's going to just go back below the ground. There's something fundamentally that I'm missing here. Some sort of setting. But if I hit play, I can see that light in front of me. And I can turn it off and on. So I'm already programming interactivity in Unreal. It's that easy, right? Blueprints are pretty swift. Oftentimes I prototype something and it ends up being the final project, right? So there we go. But now we want it to be so when we throw something over there, okay? So we're going to use a different kind of event. I'm holding down Alt and I click on here and it goes away. Or if I wanted to, I can hold down Control and I can drag it. There we go. And now I want it to be when I overlap that volume, that trigger box is listed right there, I want to do the same thing. All right. So let's jump back into VR. There you go. There's my hands floating in the air. Oh, wait. Maybe it's going to come to me. You going to come to me? Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. What's up? Oh. Where'd it go? Well, while I'm debugging, there we go. So while I'm debugging, I can make it visible. So we're selecting this trigger box. Well, I always thought it was. There we go. And what it is, it's saying it's hidden in game. It's visible right now, but it's in game. I'll take this off. Now I can see it inside of VR. Maybe a little easier for prototyping. Alright, so that's the homework, right? Done. Interactivity using blueprints. But wait, there's more. What if I wanted to do 2 of these? Then I can bring another trigger box out, bring out another light, and then I can connect those. But what if I wanted 10? What if I wanted 8? Then I'm doing repetitive work, and I should be creating a class that does this for me. So level blueprints are great for prototyping. I've prototyped the interaction. Now I want to make it so that I can replicate it much easier. So let's make our first blueprint together. I'm going to go to, I always start with an assets folder. Sorry, I hit enter already. There we go, assets. And I had caps lock on, and that's just going to be the way it is for the rest of the semester. Alright. And we have meshes. Or we can call it static meshes if we want to, because we'll have skeletal meshes later. Static meshes. And I also have blueprints. Alright, so blueprints. And if I go inside my blueprints folder and I right click, this is basically everything I can create inside the engine by right clicking here. There's a lot of different objects, but you can see blueprint class is something we're going to make the most of. So I'm going to create a blueprint. And then there's a bunch of different kinds of classes. I just want the most generic one, actor. Actor can be done. Anything can be done. There's no information really exposed. It's just like a blank slate. It's something that could be in the world. Okay. So I'm going to call this BP Light. And then I'm going to put it into the world. This is just an empty game object, right? It has this little sphere here. It's called a scene root. Just something so I can see it as I move it around the world. But what we'll notice is that I can build it inside of this blueprint interface, and it will actually happen here as well. So this has a lot of things that we had in the level blueprint, right? Like this little node, our variables here. But what we have now is components. Our components aren't into the world. They're not in the level yet. They are being built and prototyped here inside of this viewport. Okay? And then if we go over here, there's already some nodes here. We have, you might see, this might look familiar for people who've taken introductory computational media kind of classes. We have event begin play and event tick. This is like your void setup. This is your void draw. This is happening every frame, right? It's already there laid out for you. And look, we even have begin overlap just hanging out there, right? But right now this actor doesn't have any volume, so there is no overlap with it because it's basically invisible, all right? But what I could do is add a component for a collision. And there's different shapes, box, capsule, sphere, and I'm going to bring in a box collision, okay? This is what it looks like. Over here, that's what it looks like, right? As I move it around, it moves around inside the world. This is how you prototype, and why you probably need 2 screens when doing Unreal. So there's my there's my trigger. It's right here, and then as you can imagine, we also want to bring in the light. All right, so bring in my point light, and it's in there now too. Okay, and this doesn't have to be this shape. It could be a unique shape. The volumes can be manipulated either through scale, or it looks like there's box extents right here, right? So I can kind of drag out the shape and stuff, and then it's all reflected in the world. And then let's do the same interactivity. I'm gonna right click on this and say I'm gonna add an event for begin overlap, and it's gonna put it right there. And you see there's a lot more information I could do here. If I only want it to trigger when specific objects or specific players hit it, I have that kind of availability. This function has all these pins that are available to me. I don't have to use them. And in fact, all I'm going to use is the execution pin, because I just know I'm going to be throwing whatever I want at it, and I want it all to work. Bring out a reference to my point light, and again, I want to toggle visibility. There we go. And now, since we made a blueprint class, boom, we're just handing them out. Just hand them out all day long. Right? I can also hold down Alt and I can drag and it'll duplicate it. So now I have basically a seizure-inducing field. All right? So come in here, wait for my guy to roll at me. Come on, buddy. Come on. Oh, look at them. They're just turning it on by themselves. Come on. There you go. Come on. There you go. Oh, missed him. Let's get this guy. And let's throw it. Right? Interactivity. Cool. So lights are beautiful in Unreal. And one of my favorite things when I learned how to program was I love random. So instead of turning them off and on, let's make them change random colors and let's make a disco. Okay? So here again, I can change objects of the class, but I want to change all of them and have each one do a unique random. So let's just continue to work in this light. Instead of saying toggle visibility, I want to set the light color. Okay? Dragging off the point light. It is context sensitive. Set light. Oh, there. Set light color. What is it? Well, it's this little box. And we all know what that means. That's a R, a G, a B, and an A. Right? We've seen that before. We can drag it and choose a blue. And that is then reflected in the world. Well, I thought it would be. Maybe I save. Oh, it's not being executed. So it's only if it was executing, right? If I change it to event begin play, when I hit play, it would happen then, right? It's not happening now, but I hit play, and they all turn blue, right? That's how execution works. So I'm gonna hit that. I'll hold down Alt and get rid of that. What I want is a random. So this is a light. It's a light or linear color structure. It's basically I can create gradients if I want to. But I only want the R, G, and the B. I can actually right-click on this and break it apart. And there's our good old R, G's, and B's, right? And I want to do a random float within the range of 0 and 1. So let's type in random float. Oh, there it is. Random float in a range from 0 to 1. And I want a new one for R. And I'm going to hold down Control and W to duplicate. And then I have one for G. And then one for B. And I don't want to affect alpha. I want everything to be as bright as possible, so that stays at 1. And what we want to do is every time we overlap with something, we want to change the light color. All right. So now it should be back to white. Cool. I want to maybe bring this guy over closer to all the things so I can grab them before they roll too far away. There you go. And let's jump in and have a disco party. Cool. Ah, there we go. Cool. I could just probably swat it. Yeah, that's VR for you. There it is again. It's a little hard being halfway in the ground. There we go. There we go. All right, disco party. Cool. So I have the interaction I want. I now have this pawn. I have this interaction, but I'm not in the world I want to be in. So these pawns can be taken and migrated to other levels. And also these blueprints are classes. They can be imported to other levels. So this VR pawn right here, for the motion control pawn, I'm going to find it in the content browser. Okay, I know that it's in content, virtual reality, BPs, blueprints. And let's go back to the level I made last week, which was, I think, in the minimal default. And I want to have, yeah, let's clean this up a little bit. I want to have the pawn in here. All right, so I can filter if I want to by blueprints. And it was called motion controller pawn. And the trick is to remember that it needs to be set as player 0. And in fact, I also probably need to get rid of my player start, which is the default player 0. So if we come down here, select it again, and it says auto possess player. There we go, player 0. Great, I'll be in this world. But I also want to bring in all my cool lights, right? And I want to bring in my pickup cubes. So let's give ourselves an arsenal of things to throw. All right, and select them all, make them, whatever. Cool. And then I also want some lights. So that was BP light. Great. There's my little light disco field. And then let's see if it works. So here I am in the disco. There's that guy doing the thing. And I can't move at all. In fact, you see that it just ends right here. One of the things we didn't look at the level was you can actually set where you can navigate. And it was set to invisible because it's an ugly green color. You don't want to look at it. So we need to actually set where we can move and navigate. I'm going to say show where we can navigate, and we can't navigate anywhere for right now. But if I search here for a nav bounds volume and bring it in, green means go, right? So I can only teleport to this location. But it's just a little volume that I can increase the size of. And now I can teleport to all these locations, right? So you can see I'm kind of using one as a big broad stroke. You use a bunch of them to make little areas where you can navigate if you only want to go to certain places inside of a VR experience. Also, you see that it can't go up on these hills. That's just because it's the size. I can make the volume bigger, and now I can navigate onto the hills as well. And so if I go back in to an experience, and I want to teleport over to the thing, now you see I can do it. And we got a disco party going on. Hey, buddy. Alright. So, with the time we have left, do you want to see objects from the world, or do you want to see objects from Tilt Brush? Want to see Tilt Brush? Okay, so I'm going to save this, and we're going to open up, because I've already calibrated the Oculus headset with the Oculus interface. If I open up Steam VR now, it'll work with my Oculus as well. So Steam VR. So if you want to, you can use Tilt Brush this week. It should be installed on the computers. If not, let me know. I can log in for you. It's like $20, I think. It's totally cool. I'm going to show you how to export it. It's kind of a hidden feature to find out how to export what you make in Tilt Brush. And then we can bring it in, and let's look at maybe collisions and how we can throw money around maybe in VR. So we can make it rain. We'll make it rain like after midterms. Okay, so since I'm not tracking, dismiss. There it is. It says ready, and then I can choose the game from here, maybe. Workshop. Nope, I'm gonna open up Steam. Steam. Oh, there it is, right there. Tilt Brush. Tilt Brush is great. Like, you can do camera moves. You can record it for other people. There's I think I even showed you guys this guy Danny Bitman who DJs in Tilt Brush in real time on stage. There you go, graffiti art. So here I am having the best time of my life inside of Tilt Brush, and we have two. So Tilt Brush is a painting metaphor. It's very much like oil paints. There's also Quill, which is in the Oculus Store. That's more like watercolors, and Medium, which is like clay. So I have my palette and I have my brush, right? Point to interact, and we see the things. I want a new sketch, right? And now my thumb, I can choose for settings. I want to maybe make a paper. There we go. So I'm gonna draw. There we go. Oops, I had a button somewhere. Let's go back to Tilt Brush. Finish it right where I left off. There we go. We can throw money around that way, and I can pick it up. How do I pick it up? I haven't done this in a while. It should tell me. How do I pick things up? I can erase that way. Make the thing bigger and smaller. That's my measuring tape. See how big everything is. Let's see. Well, I don't need to pick up. What I was going to do is I was going to move it down to the ground. Because right now what happens when I throw this in, the pivot point will be down there. The little arrows will show me how it's oriented. I can also get down on my knees and I guess draw it again. Not really that important. You can see that we have this cool dollar sign that is in 3D. Alright, so if I come around to the tools, at the bottom there's a dot dot dot. And this is why I want to show you, because it's pretty hard to find. And then you go to labs, and then you go to export. I haven't saved this project yet. You can always just save. Right, save the sketch, give it a name. Let's save the sketch. Take a picture of it. Cool. I still didn't give it a name though. Anyway, we'll export. Exporting sketch. It's called Untitled, and it'll be in my Documents folder. All right. Making VR content in VR is the height of VR. Let's crash Tilt Brush, and then let's come to Unreal. Go back to my Assets folder, and I made that folder for static meshes. Let's import, and it's going to be in my Documents and my Tilt Brush folder under Exports, and it was called Untitled. So that's from here, and it's called here. So that's the FBX file. That's the file format, and we'll import it. And it's going to auto-generate collision. It's going to figure out collisions. I'm not going to draw it in to begin with. I can always just say don't, and let's not worry about it. So it's going to bring in everything. Cool. And then one thing, so here's some warnings. These are not errors or warnings. One thing it's going to say is no smoothing group information. Not super important. Smoothing groups are only generated through Maya. It's basically being a snob and saying, you're not using Maya. Whatever. We could put it Maya, but this doesn't mean anything. And then also says something. It also says it's very small. Tilt Brush is exports everything at literally 100 times smaller than Unreal units. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and delete it. And I'm going to import it again. And this time I'm going to import and I'm going to scale it up 100 at the beginning. And now that error or warning is no longer there, and I have a dollar sign. Cool. And let's take a look at the auto-generated collisions. All right, it's not so bad. I can maybe make it a little bit tighter, right? I can move it around. I can manipulate. I can delete it. I can say auto-generate, which might take a little while because it is a complex shape. Let's try it. Let's delete. And this is this auto convex collision generator. It makes things a little bit tighter. Sometimes these collisions are really loose around it, and you're grabbing air, and you don't want that. You want a better user experience. This might take a little bit of a second. But what I have here also is this green thing is material, as we've seen from dragging materials around the starter content. And this red thing is a texture. It actually has a little bit of an opacity channel around it that makes it look like paper. And that texture is inside of the material, which is its own node-based system that we'll take a look at once it's done with processing the voxelization of our collision. It might take a second. So while it's taking a second, I'll just show you. They made Quill for Dear Angelica. See, it's no shadows. Very much a watercolor metaphor. We also have Medium. There's a fabrication class that I come in and we make stuff in Medium, and then we actually use the CNC router to make the 3D object. And you're like really pushing and pulling around clay. which can be super gratifying in VR. I haven't used this in a year. I spent a lot of time coloring my object, and that colors didn't export when I tried it. So hopefully they've improved that in the last year. But yeah, so that's, you just get to pull, push, and tear, and all that kind of stuff. All this stuff is pretty cool. And then export the object and 3D print it or something. So and there's Google has blocks. I don't know if that's there. That one's free, and that is literally you stack all these different voxels on top of each other to create stuff. Right? Has a good low poly look. This one is actually more performative than the other ones to generate low poly content. So definitely, I encourage you guys to jump into some of this stuff. You can maybe create your own stylistic way of creating a VR experience, and you don't need to have all the help of other people to make assets for you. I have a friend who actually does, he goes to events and does people's portraits in Tilt Brush, and then he uploads it to SketchUp and then sends it to people, which is a super cool kind of service. I shouldn't have done this voxelization thing. I knew it was going to be too much processing. Let's give it a few more seconds. Otherwise, I'll crash it, and we'll move on. Are there any questions so far about migrating pawns, collisions, blueprints? Are pretty straightforward. We're not doing too heavy. You know, if you want to throw away your world and start over from scratch, that's fine. Next week, we're going to start like brainstorming and coming up with concepts and really trying to execute on our concepts and try to faithfully recreate them in VR. This week is really just about like, hey, let's just do some VR and experience interaction so that we have, we've said we've done it so far. And then if we can get into Tilt Brush, we also can, the other experiences that I want to try to do are so read these articles, especially the first one is the most important one for sure. And then you know, use a first person or a VR pawn, do some reactions, at least one, try to do 3, and then do VR capture. And then let's try to do a little mood board. I don't know if you guys have done any mood boarding, but it's just like, let's just gather some images and put in your blog post. Let's start thinking about people who could be in this world. And maybe next week we'll make some character mood boards. You know, just mood boards, kind of some ideas you're interested in executing this year. I know that some of you guys have already posted in your blogs what you've already want to do. Yeah.
Is there 2 different objects and that and they're controlling the same light bulb? 2 different interactions?
Yeah.
So then how would you do it?
You would have both interactions like inside of the same blueprint, right? Controlling the same object, or you can do communication through. There's 3 different ways of doing communication across blueprints. Okay. There's a whole section of that, and that gets a little bit more complicated. You can make abstraction blueprints, which can be called from anywhere. You can make a public variable inside of your game mode that can be reached from all blueprints, and then you can do what's called blueprint event sending or whatever, and then you're actually having to it's a way of opening up a brief channel between 2 blueprints that you don't want to keep open for a long period of time, so you don't want to have to do much processing. Let's see if we got some voxelization. Well, that was a bad idea on my part. So Control Shift Escape gives me the task manager, an Unreal Engine. You're gone. No shame in that. So I'll probably have to re-import the asset into that level, and then we'll throw it around, and then we'll be done for the day. Right, so that stuff's still there. We have our pawn there. That's great. Let's go ahead and import our tilt brush, documents, tilt brush, exports, entitled 0. There we go. And we're going to let it auto-generate collisions. We're not going to fall for that again. Import it. Oh, and then there's a scale thing. No problem. Now we'll all remember. There you go. Make it 100 times bigger. Import. Okay. And so, as I said, it already has a texture. Right? This is the texture. You can see it has this paper look to it. All right. And then we have the material that texture is inside of. Let's take a quick look at material nodes. Okay. Another node-based thing. I don't know if you guys opened it up or not. But basically, the major things for us for today is we have a base color and an opacity. Okay. And the opacity, right here we see we have R, G, and a B. Well, that's an A, right? So we're actually taking the color of this texture image. We want to take the opacity of it. So this is what the image looks like. It's going to be just white. Let's bring in the opacity right there. And now take a look at it. It's got that transparency to it then. Cool? And then, what if we don't want white? Well, if I hold down 3 and I click, I have now a 3 vector that I can, that's my color. Is everything there? There? And then I have a blue piece of paper, right? That's very simple how I can adjust some stuff from the internet or from the other programs. So we're going to keep the opacity that it has. And let's take some more BP cubes. Save all. Let's look for some more blueprints. BP cube. Pick up cube. But now, instead of being the cube, I want it to be my entitled money. Is it big? Is it small? Is it invisible? Oh, there it is. Remember, the pivot point's off. So it's really small. I can make it bigger. Right now it's a lot bigger. And this is what I was saying, where tilt brush imports from the 0, 0. That's why I was trying to bring it down. It's up in the air. But that's fine. We can, offset it or something like that. But that's where the collisions are, around it itself. Right? And so let's make, I'm holding down Alt and making a few. Thought it was. Let's duplicate here. All right. There we go. Making money. Paying off my student loans in VR. Cool. And now let's hit play. Oh, look at my money. It's so cool. Making it rain. Take my money. There we go. So it's a fun day. Let's dive into it. Let me know if you have any problems. And then I can't wait to see what you guys make. I might adjust the homework just slightly. I don't think I have enough